Okay, our third segment here in our muscular system unit is on energy use and muscle fibers. Now, what you need to remember with energy is that energy in a body is created by ATP. Okay, so how do we generate ATP? Well, we have it in two ways. We have it through aerobic respiration as well as anaerobic respiration. So let's go through the characteristics of each. Aerobic respiration requires oxygen, and it produces the most ATP. In fact, 36 total ATP are produced. The reactants are glucose and oxygen, and the products are carbon dioxide and water. It takes place in the mitochondria, and it is limited by the available oxygen. Now, anaerobic respiration, by contrast, takes place without any oxygen and only produces a total of 2 ATP. Now, the reactants are both glucose and some enzymes. Now, both sets have enzymes, but I didn't want to just put glucose down. And the products are carbon dioxide as well as lactic acid. That's what built up in our muscles. This takes place in the cytoplasm, which is in the muscle cells, or it's called the sarcoplasm. And it is necessary when the oxygen levels in our muscles are not sufficient to meet the ATP demands of our fibers. So when we are working out, depending on the type of workout that we do, we could enter anaerobic respiration. Aerobic is the preferred form. Now, this actually leads to muscle fatigue. And muscle fatigue happens when the muscle cannot contract despite stimulation. This is caused by either a lack of ATP, or in most cases it's a buildup of lactic acid. We actually disrupt the homeostasis of the cells. Now, during this time of the recovery is when the lactic acid gets removed, and because at that point we haven't kind of replenished our ATP reserves, we need increased oxygen demands to do that. And when we have that increased oxygen demands during that recovery period, that extra demand is referred to as our oxygen debt. Now, if we actually look at our muscle fibers, we can also classify them. We have fast fibers, which are also known as fast twitch fibers, which some athletes are familiar with, and most of our skeletal fibers are fast twitch. These have a very large diameter, and they are densely packed. They produce very powerful contractions, but they use ATP very quickly, and they fatigue very quickly as a result. Now, the other type, if we've got fast fibers, we also have slow fibers. And slow fibers are also known as slow twitch fibers. These have a smaller diameter and take much longer to contract, hence the slow part. However, they can contract for a longer period of time. And part of that reason is because they have a better oxygen supply, they are able to store more oxygen, and they're also able to use the oxygen more effectively. Now, when we actually have a muscle, and you take a look at it, it's a combination of these fibers. Now, muscle that has mostly fast fibers are pale, and we call those white muscles. So if you think of something like a turkey or chicken, that creates white meat. And white meat is typically found in the breast. And if you think about a turkey or chicken, they're not very good flyers. And those breast muscles are actually what you use to flap your wings. So because those are fast twitch fibers, they only kind of flutter because those muscles fatigue so quickly they really can't get off the ground. But if you look at another bird, like a duck, their breast is actually very red. It's very, it's dark meat, so to speak. Well, that's because their muscle fibers are mostly slow fibers, and that's what we call red muscle or dark meat. Because they are able to use them for longer periods of time, those are mostly made up of the slow fibers. Okay, so those are used more often, and so like in a turkey or a chicken, we would probably find the dark meat, or we should find the dark meat, in the legs because they're walking everywhere. Now, human muscles are often pink because our muscles are mostly a mixture of the two of them, but I thought I'd explain your Thanksgiving turkey to you for a little bit here. Now, we can have, because of these different fibers and the different types of respiration that take place, we can relate it to certain types of athletics. Anaerobic endurance is the amount of time that muscle contractions can be supported by our ATP reserves and the process of glycolysis within the cell. Some activities that require anaerobic endurance are things like the 50-yard dash or the pole vault or competitive weightlifting. These are very brief, very intense activities, and that's exactly how you build up your anaerobic endurance. Brief but very intense workouts. By contrast, we can also talk about our aerobic endurance, which is the amount of time that we can actually produce ATP using aerobic respiration in the mitochondria. This includes activities like jogging or distance swimming. We need to keep the activity at a decent level, but not too high, not too intense, so that our mitochondria and our oxygen supplies can actually keep up. These activities often require carb loading because we need a good source of glucose. So this is why athletes who participate in these kinds of activities carb load right before the event. Now, our muscular system also interacts with certain other systems, specifically during exercise. Okay, so the muscular system has to be supported by systems during exercise, and that's in order to accommodate the changes that muscles make to the body's homeostasis. So let's start off here with the cardiovascular system. The blood vessels dilate and the heart rate increases. This speeds up the delivery of oxygen and the removal of carbon dioxide, and we bring heat to the skin. The respiratory system, we have the rate and depth of breathing increasing, and that helps to keep pace with the increased blood flow through the lungs. The integumentary system, the blood vessels in the skin actually dilate, and the sweat gland production increases. This promotes evaporation and heat dissipation because basically it's like a pot sitting on a stove where you get the heat coming in underneath and it actually kind of boils away, so to speak, the water from the sweat, which removes the heat from the body completely. Now, the last systems that work with the muscular system are the nervous and endocrine systems, and they function to control your heart rate, your breathing rate, and your sweat gland activity. We're not going to go into the specifics, though, just because those mechanisms are kind of complicated. Now, the last presentation that we have in this unit is on naming of skeletal muscles, and we will also talk about some of the main muscle groups, and we will do that next.